Senior associate in the cyber management team, and we have Dhanith Krishna. He is from service senior manager from EY cybersecurity team. So we have some interesting sessions coming up. So let's listen to that. And over to you, Midhun. And over to you, Midhun.
Tap the speaker on. So, mute. Hello. Hi. Hello. Hello. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. So, my name is Midhun. I am working in EY as Supervising Associate in Cyber Fight and Forensics team. So today I am going to take a small session on email forensics. Like you all are using email, right? So we all are using emails. Now all communications is through emails. So how to identify a legit email or a fake email? That's a simple thing I'm going to give a session along with the demo. Okay. So we, without the help of any ingenious tools, with the help of the publicly available tools, we can able to identify whether an email is a legit email or say fake or phishing or spoofing. So I'm going to talk about that thing. So before going to that, we should understand some basics of the email. So my agenda, I'm going to cover why we focus on email investigation and all you need to know about email systems. I'm talking about email headers and email workflow, and finally, what are the different types of email threads. So why we need to focus on email investigation? So in this slide. So email is the number one vector for digital threats. And as per the latest reports, around 56% of all emails are spam. What is spam? It's unsolicited emails, some marketing emails, or some invitations, or some that kind of unsolicited emails are called as spam emails. So out of 100, around 56% of emails that we receive every day are spam. Just ignore it. And one of 412 emails are malicious. Out of 412 emails, one email would be malicious. And 92% of malware are delivered by email. That's very important. Because email is an easy way to communicate as well as easy way to transfer the malicious file to the recipient side. Okay. So 92% of malware are delivered by email. So rest of the 8% would be comes under other things like maybe some internal thread or some other kind of some USB will be plugged in and through that some malicious activities happening. So those are comes under only 8%. And 92% of malware delivered by email. 48% of malicious attachments are office stuff. Obviously, in a corporate world, we are more using the office documents. So 48% of malicious attachments are office docs. 56% of companies consider targeted phishing as their top security concern. Targeted phishing is called as spear phishing. So that attack is focusing only on that company. Okay, so let's say Infosys. So there are some companies that is only focusing on Infosys. They will get information regarding Infosys email gateway, all those things, and they will be sending emails to only to that particular company. So those kind of targeted attacks, we call it as spear attack or spear phishing or targeted phishing. And 83% of organizations have been victim of spear phishing attacks in the last 1 year. And 32% of data breaches involve phishing. I will talk about what is phishing. Then employees in small organizations are more likely to be hit by email threats because they don't have the efficient email gateway security in place to prevent this kind of attacks. So mostly the small organizations are likely to be hit by this. Recently there was a ransomware attack happened, I think 1 week back. Probably you might be aware of it. That is focusing only on the small industry banks, not the corporate banks. It's only focusing on the small industry like the cooperative banks, other private sector small. There's a ransomware attack that happened last week. So because of these reasons, we have to be in the sense that in the corporate, every organization is very much focusing on this email investigation, or we call it as email forensics. Okay. So I'm talking about the email headers first. So these things, I think everyone know that email has a two part. One is the header part, and one is the body part. So when we heard about the email, the first thing that we heard is this one. So it has two parts. It has a body part and it has a header part. Why? Because I am focusing this is that this email header analysis is the core of the email investigation. Because we get a lot of information from the headers. So it's just a piece of some statements, but still we can get a lot of information that can be helpful for our investigation from the email headers. So an email has two parts, the body part and the header part. An email header contains information related to the transmission process of an email. Probably we have here email comparing to the conventional way of sending letters. Postcard, like, so I send a letter to my friend who is in Bangalore. So I wrote a letter, put it in the nearest post office. From there it goes to the next post office. So using the pin code, it's track and finally it reaches my friend's home. Similar way, when it comes to the digital world, that the same transmission is happening for the email also. It's not sending directly from my machine to my friend's machine. In between, a lot of hopes, we call it as hopes. So a lot of hopes are there, and it transfers through that hopes. And all these data are recording in the header part. And that's why this email header investigation or email header analysis is the core of email forensics. So it's provide information about the sender and recipients. Who is the sender? Who is the recipient? All those informations are available in the email header part. And it also identifies the email route. As I said, once you get a letter from your friend, you can able to see the seals that has been pasted by the each post office. So by looking into that seal, you can able to confirm that that post letter which came through which are post offices and finally reach outside. Similarly, in the case of email also, this header is a vital part to identify the email route through which are hopes. I told you different hopes are there. Through which are hopes that email transferred and finally reached my mail or our recipients. Okay. And it also ensures the authenticity of the email. So as I said, email is the vital or number one vector that is used for attacks. So we need to make sure that the authenticity of the email, that authenticity check can be also done with the help of the header analysis. And it is the primary evidence in the case of email related crimes. So primary evidence is in talking about it's the law enforcement agency's perspective. So for a law enforcement agency's perspective, there are cases which involve email communications. In that cases, this header or the header analysis or the report that we give based on the email header analysis is the vital part at the court of law. When the final verdict is happening, this report, the email header analysis report, the coach will take it serious, and based on that, they can be able to give a grade. Okay, so this is a small try, this of email headers. So these are the headers that we mainly focus on. A lot of information are available in the email header, but we as a point of investigation or as a perspective of investigation, we look into these fields: receipt header, from header, to header, subject, date, message ID, reply to, and return path. So we are mainly focusing on these headers. Okay. So this comes under RFC. RFC is a standard that is for the email communication. So it's a format for electronic mail transfer. So that format we call it as RFC. Okay. So this is an example of, so this one, I don't think I need to explain these things. So received header means which machine receives that email, and also it record from which machine that email comes. So I told the email will be sending from different hops to hops. So the received header tracks which machine which receives that email plus from which machine that email comes. So these two information tracks in the received header. And from header is nothing but the sender name and address. Two is again the recipient name and address. And the subject is subject of the email, date. Message ID is a unique ID which is for each email transmission. So unique ID for each email transmission is called message ID. Reply to and return path. So anyone knows what is the difference between reply to and return path? Any idea? Reply to, when you check the email header, in all emails you can see these two headers. Reply to and return path. What is the difference between these two? If I want to respond to that email, so let's say Prashant send me an email. I want to respond to that email. So I send reply and then I type the subject and send. So that mail is going to Prashant because once you click on the reply, automatically what field is shown up in the reply to header will be automatically populated. Whenever you get a mail, you send a reply, automatically what information available in the reply to header will automatically comes up in the to field. So that is reply to whom we need to reply. That is reply to. And return path is using when there is an error happen. So when there is an error happen to that email transmission, that error message should goes to where? So that is the difference. So that is a key field that we can use. If you got an email and the email header, I got the email from Krisha. When I look into the header information, the reply to is Dhanith. So who comes that email? Krisha or Dhanith? Because obviously if that email comes to Krisha, the reply to field should contain Krisha's name. But that contains whose name? Dhanith's name. So Dhanith is the attacker who is composing that email in the name of Krisha and sending to me. And Dhanith know me and Krisha are friends. So I might respond to Prashant. So maybe Prashant is asking for my bank account details for transfer some amount, or maybe something else, my personal some credentials. So I trust Prashant. I respond to that email, thinking like that will be sending to Prashant. And there are mechanisms when you click on the reply button that can be shown by Prashant name also, but it is actually sending to that. So that is the difference between reply to and return path. Reply to is to whom we need to reply. Return path is happening when an error happens. So in some case, if you send an email, that email won't deliver properly. So that undeliverable message, have you seen? That undeliverable message should be sent to where? That is in the return path. That's the difference. Okay. So this is a sample email header. So the one previously shown is the part of the headers, reply to all those things. So this is a sample on our usual Alice and Bob case. Okay. So it's an example of a message header for an email sent from alice@outlook.com to bob@gmail.com. So always the header need to be read from bottom to top. That is a primary rule. So once you get a header, that header you have to analyze from bottom to top, because it is appending above and above. The records are, the email header informations are appending above and above. So we have to read it from bottom to top. So here you can see that the from header is there, to header is there, subject is there, date is there, received from. So received from is very interesting. See, received from which IP? So this 11.11.11.111 is the IP of Alice machine. So Alice composed the email and he click on send. So at that time, the received header will track this information. So from this 11.11. That is Alice computer by mail.outlook.com. Mail.outlook.com is the mailbox of Outlook server. If I am using Outlook, that email should be go through Outlook server. If I am using Gmail, the mail goes through Gmail server. Similarly, it first goes to the corresponding server. So Outlook.com is the corresponding server. So mail.outlook.com is the corresponding server of Alice mailbox having the mail address Alice at Outlook.com. Done. The second header is done, and it is sending the SMTP protocol. And this is the time when that email has been sent. All this information. Above that, it's message ID. So it's not necessary to be in the same order. Okay, I just pasted only the information that we want. So not necessary to be in this exact order, but these fields should be there. Next, message ID. As I told you, message ID is a unique ID which is used for identifying each mail. Above that, next received header. That is the email goes to the mail server. From mail server, it goes to the next hop because it should reach the Gmail server. Because the recipient address is bob@gmail.com. So the email should reach the Gmail server. So it next go to received header. So I told you that received header track the machine which receives the email plus from where that mail comes also. Here you can see that. So receive from mail.outlook.com. Because the email reached till mail.outlook.com. From mail.outlook.com, it received by mx.gmail.com. That is a Gmail's mailbox. With SMTP protocol again. And finally, it reaches the Bob's mailbox. The second one, received by 10.56.81.31. So that is the IP of Bob's mail. Okay. So finally, when the email reaches the Gmail server or the mailbox, whenever the Bob logins and the email will directly drop to his mail. Okay. And that is that header. So this is the sample header when an email sends from one source to the other source. Next, I will show you the workflow, how it works. Okay. So in this case, take the same example. Alice want to send an email from alice@outlook.com to bob@gmail.com. So Alice mail or Alice machine or Alice mailbox, we call it as mail user agent. MUA. MUA is mail user agent. So mail user agent is which mailbox Alice is using to compose and send the email. So in this case, Alice is using Outlook. So Outlook is the mail user agent. So Alice is composing that message in MUA, Outlook mailbox, and send. So obviously, what happens? It goes to Outlook mailbox. So it goes to Outlook mailbox. The Outlook mailbox is the MTA, mail transfer agent. Okay. So the first one is where the mail is composing is MUA, mail user agent, and it is transferring to the corresponding mailbox, and that is MTA, mail transfer agent. And that mail transfer agent IP is starting with 209. Done. Okay. So Alice mail reaches the corresponding mailbox of Outlook. Then what happened is that now what happened is that this information or this transfer contains the SMTP protocol, which contains these three things. SMTP protocol, SMTP protocol format is only these three fields. Mail from, receipt to, board. Only these ones. It's not even secure. Okay. It's sending from mail from alice@outlook.com to bob@gmail.com and the message body. So once it reaches the Outlook, mx.outlook.com, it doesn't know to where that email to be transferred. It only knows at Gmail server. But the MTA, mailbox doesn't know the IP of that Gmail server. If we don't know that IP of this Gmail server or any server, what we will do? DNS. Oh, sorry. Before that, the received header. Received from 10.176.32.53. That is the IP of MUA by mx.outlook.com with IP 209 with which protocol? SMTP protocol and the unique identifier and the date and time. Done. Next, MTA will ask DNS. MTA will ask DNS server what is the IP of mx.gmail.com because I need to send the email from answer@outlook.com to Gmail. So what is the IP of mx.gmail.com? DNS will give the response like it starts with 198. So 198. So not the exact IP it will give, but in this example I show like it starts with 198. Okay. So MTA got that information. Now MTA will do? Will send that email directly to mx.gmail.com with IP 198. Okay, and what would be the header? Received from mx.outlook.com with IP 209. That is the first MTA by mx.gmail.com. That is the MTA of the recipient with IP 192. And here we have seen some other informations. ESMTP / TLS / ECDHE, RSA, AES. What is it? We don't know. What is RES? Encryption. So ESMTP means extended SMTP, or it is also called as enhanced SMTP. So because I told that in the first case, we have only 3 records. Receive to, from, and also body. And it's not even secure. So to enable the features or to enable extra features to the SMTP protocol, there is a new protocol that comes up, that is ESMTP, which is called as extended SMTP or enhanced SMTP. Both means we can go. Okay. And followed by the algorithm, the cryptographic algorithm for public key encryption. So that is ECDHE, RSA, AES-256, GCM, SHA-384. And SHA-384 used for ensuring the authenticity of the email. So that all happening along with that transfer. Okay. So that is happening when that email is sending from one MTA that belongs to one mailbox to the other MTA that belongs to other mailbox, because that traffic is happening in the internet. That is happening in the internet because from one mailbox to other mailbox, that is maybe some other country. So that's happening through the internet. So to ensure the data, to ensure the secrecy of the data that we are sending, we are using the ESMTP protocol along with the encryption. Okay, fine. So that is the MTA of Gmail mailbox. From MTA to MDA, mail delivery agent. So that's the corresponding mailbox of Bob. That's the corresponding mailbox of Bob. MTA is the mailbox of Gmail. Okay, so MDA is the mailbox of the recipient user's mailbox. That is mx.mda.gmail.com. That is having the IP 10 dot, starting with 10 dot. Again, the header would be received from mx.gmail.com with 198 IP by mx.mda.gmail.com with 10.x.x with Microsoft SMTP server and again the encryption. And finally, when Bob's login, that will be sent to MRI, mail recipient. So which protocol is using there? Till MDA, mx.mda.gmail.com is this SMTP. And the next one is POP or IMAP. So the recipient is always through POP or IMAP protocol and the message transfer is always in the SMTP protocol. Okay, so up to this clear. So if you know,
why does it we are getting it to MTA with different IP address?
to
MTA different IP address.
so the first MTA is the mailbox of Outlook and the second MTA is the mailbox of Gmail.
Different
That's I told you. No? So if I am sending if I am composing an email from Outlook, that email first goes to the my mailbox. So that is the empty of sender, and I am sending to a Gmail.com. So that Gmail is the second empty. So likewise, multiple MTAs are there.
Okay, if we don't have, if it is same Outlook, if it is same Outlook, so we will get MDA, MDA, mail delivery agent. So we get, if it is same
Outlook to Outlook.
if it is Outlook to Outlook, we will get MDA,
We will get MDA.
not MTA. Okay, MTA is, we are giving MDA because of two different domains.
Yeah.
After that, that is, we can able to see MDA, mail delivery agent. If it is same domain, I mean, the MDA will be commercial picture or not?
MT and MDA will act like one.
Oh, okay. That's
If it is in the same network, MT and MDA is act like one. So just go to that server and deliver to same server. So that is like we call this internal emails, right? Internal emails. Okay, now we are going to. So now we are going to email threads. Different types of email threads that we are seeing in a corporate environment. Okay, so these are the same emails that you can see in your personal life also, except the first one. First one is mainly targeting for that business. Okay, so we can go through each and I will show you some examples also. So the first one is, these are the different type of email threads. One is BEC, then spoof emails, then phishing emails, and finally malicious emails. Okay. So what is BEC? It is called the business email compromise. So scammer uses email to trick someone into sending money or divulging confidential company info. Okay. So culprit poses as a trusted figure, then ask for a fake bill to be paid or for sensitive data they can use in others. Probably you will be getting from your manager or from the CEO of the company. Okay. So I'm getting an email from my CEO of the company and then I want to talk to you. So please share the contact details. So I'm so happy. Out of these muches of employees all over the world, CEO is only sending me to me, asking my number and he want to personally talk to me. I'm so happy. Okay. So he will share the number and this is history. Okay. So this is a sample example of how a BEC email looks like. Due to security purpose, I have masked a few things. Okay. So hello, can we make a transfer today? And I need you to take care of an urgent transfer of $6,800 right now. So I can forward you the vendor details for payment. Kindly get back to me as soon as possible. There's nothing but only the body would be there. So they want us to respond. That's the only thing. That BEC image doesn't contain any URL or any attachment or nothing. Very rarely it would be there, but usually it won't contain any URL or any attachment. It's just a body, and the only intention they want is they want us to respond. Now, what information they get if we respond? So we get header information. They are able to identify a lot of information from the header information if I respond, because that email goes to my company's network, my company's exchange server, my company's gateway. Okay, so reconnaissance. The attacker's first step, reconnaissance. They can get a lot of information if I respond. And also if I respond, they will come up with some other tricks. And very rarely people fall into that also. We have experiences. This is just 6,800 USD. We have more than USD that has been lost because of BEC. Okay. Okay. So there is nothing much to talk about BEC. It's just a business email compromise, which sends from a trusted figure, it seems, but it should be from a third party or an attacker. Okay. Okay. Next is an interesting thing, email spoofing. Probably you all know, right? What is spoofed email? Spoofed email. So always you have to check that spoofed email, spoofed email. That's the spoofed email. What is spoofed email? Yeah. It's also some kind of fake emails, impersonating. Correct, exactly. It's impersonating someone and sending an email. Okay. So today you all will be getting an email from midhun.mohan@gmail.com. Hello everyone. Attached with the presentation of the session I had taken today. Out of this, let's say 50 people, 5 or 10 would believe that. Oh, he got that email ID of all the participants from the OWASP or places, and they asked me to share that email. Probably you will get your thing. So, from midhun.mohan@gmail.com. Hello everyone, thanks for attending today's session. Please find attached today's presentation. Okay. Do enjoy. That's all. So you go to that attachment, you take on the attachment, it's not open. It's not open. It's asking you to log in somewhere. Probably OneDrive. You once you click on that one, it's showing like that this PPT is uploaded in the OneDrive. You need to log in with the OneDrive. If you click on that one, you will get a page exactly of OneDrive. Okay. Because we already believe that email is from me. So we don't have the patience to look at the what is the URL. Click on that one. Give your OneDrive credentials, like Gmail credentials, right? Credentials. I will get all your credentials. And we have a habit like that, saying credentials will be using on multiple sources. Using that credentials, I can log into your Facebook, I can log into your Instagram. Right. So this can happen. So these things can happen actually. So these kind of emails is called as spoofed emails. So that email is encrypted. And another thing is that if you already logged into the Gmail, I don't think it will ask for OneDrive to log in. Am I right? If you already logged into the Gmail, you already logged into the Gmail. Once you click on that link, if it is an OneDrive link, it will directly take you to the OneDrive. I don't think it again asks for us. Okay. Okay, so email spoofing is the creation of emails with a forged central address. Like assigned at midhun.mohan@gmail.com. My email address is not that. Okay. So email spoofing is possible because simple mail transfer protocol does not provide an authentication method. I have found the first thing. First, MQA to the MTA. It has only 3 fields, and that's not even secure. Okay. Spoof the email header to mislead the recipient about the sender of the email. Again, with a name like Midhun, you might be thinking like that, I'm sending that. Email spoofing is a popular tactic used in phishing and malicious campaigns. The goal of email spoofing is to get recipients to open and possibly even respond to a solicitation. So that is called the email spoofing. Okay, so now I will show you an example of a spoofed email. the header information. This is the case of blue. It's different in different way. In Gmail, there is another way, but header information is available in the email itself. It's not visible to us, but it's there internally. So we will copy all these things. I copied all these things and For the time being, you just remember that SPF is authenticity of the. So every organization have a set of IPs that is just designated to send an email from their domain. Let's say Infosys have a set of IP. That IP can be used to send an email from their domain. Similar to that of the Outlook also. Outlook has a set of IPs. From that IPs only, the legit emails from Outlook sent out. So in this case, we can get that IP like 89.190.64.21, which means that the email I have shown is originated from this IP, 89.190.64.21 IP. Okay, so that IP, whether that IP is designated to send an email on behalf of Outlook or not, that's the thing that we need to check. For that, there is a tool called, probably you have seen like MS Toolbox. That is called the SPF checker. Yeah, so MS Toolbox. In this tool, we can able to check. So what is that IP? That IP is copy that IP. Is that, and it is from Outlook.com. Go for SPF record. So this tool will check whether that IP is, they have a database. Based on that check, they will identify whether that IP is or it's under the Outlook.com. Yeah, here we can see that if it comes like orange, this thing, which means that it's not the, that IP is not belongs to Outlook. If it comes like green, which means that the IP belongs to Outlook. So once you come down, here you can see SPF authentication, SPF failed for IP 89.190.64.24. It's clear cut, we can able to confirm this is a spoofed email in the name of Outlook. Spoofed email in the name of Outlook. Okay. So there is few IPs that has been listed above that comes under this range. Okay, this one 156.55. If it is 157.55.9, 128. Okay. So which means that it's green. So which means that this IP belongs to Outlook and it is authorized for send IP. SPF record found. So simple way, once you get an email, go to the header information, look for identity is equal to mail from header. There you can see whether it is soft fail, whether it is failed, or whether it is pass. If it is pass means that IP is designated to send email from that one. If it is soft fail or failed, soft fail means that either that IP's record is not available or it is fake. Hard, hard fail means that, fail means that it's purely a spoof. Got it? Okay. One more thing I will show you. In the previous email, the previous email, you can see it is going to this domain, right? www.taxjobs.com. You can see what the domain is. Just right down click instead of just right click, copy hyperlink. That has been copied. And there are few tools, probably you all know that. Our usual tools like Aristotle, and there is one tool like URL scan. Have you heard about URL scan? So we can check what it is. Definitely, it won't get any hits because this domain has been created years back. So definitely, we won't get any hits for sure. But we have some means to check whether that domain has been analyzed historically. So historical search we can able to search from URLs. Okay, Aristotle saying it's clean, but status is browser of what?
Case where this person is more fail of failing than those getting,
I don't know. It's often means that either that IP is record is not recorded properly. So in that case, we can see. Otherwise, I can't see. If it is fail means that is fail. Okay, so it's possible for because that has been taken down and it's 4 years back, 4 years ago. That's it. So the attack has been created domain for some sort of time also. Check for this one. Again, browser for. But as I told you, there is a means for search historical data. So that is in the search tab. So once you go to the search tab, just put the domain only. No need to put that entire thing. Just put the domain only. Yeah, just go and search. If this has been historically searched, that report would be available here. So we have few reports. Yes. Okay. Exactly same URL, right? The URL that we found in the image. HTTPS www.taxjobs.com plugins 2019-20 tax returns. Same URL. Actually, that URL is redirecting to a malicious URL, which is hosting a fake credential phishing page. You can see that it's a credential phishing page. So you can sign in with Outlook. You can sign in with AOL, Office 365. So once you click on, you will give the credentials. It has been compromised. So it's spoofing. So similarly, in the case of phishing phishing and malicious URL. Since we are lack of time, I'm just keeping all those things. But I will give an. Okay. So this is email spoofing. Now, what is phishing email? So it's impersonate legitimate organizations via email, text message, advertisement, or other means in order to steal sensitive information. Usually done by including a link that will appear to take you to the website to fill in your information. But the website is a clever fake and the information you provide goes straight to the groups behind the script. Same story. Today you all will be getting an invitation from me for a Facebook request via email. Okay. So once you log in, you can get an email back. Midhun Mohan has requested a Facebook request. There is a link also. FACEB 00K. Not FACEB. Oh, okay. It's 00K. But it's very difficult to identify 0 and 1. And also we are very hurry. Click on that one. Exact Facebook page. Give the credentials. It's showing up like the credentials you have entered is wrong. And then it will redirect you to the correct Facebook page. There you enter the same credentials that you have entered in the previous page. It will log in. So what happened the initial time? That attacker got your credentials. Then you log into the legit page. So it's another way of is that this is through emails. If it is through voice, it is called phishing. Probably will be getting called. Your account has been locked. There is an OTP has been sent to you. Please click. If it is through SMS, it is called a So similar story, phishing with email has been come with URL and attachment. Whether it's a URL in the email itself, you click on that URL, it will direct you to the same story. The spoofing email we have shown that. So that's a URL. Attachment means there is an attachment. Once you click on the attachment, there is an embedded URL is there. Once you click that one, it will take you to the phishing page. Okay. Next, malicious email. The purpose of phishing is to stealing the credentials. But the malicious is that to do hackers try to get access to your private information. And malicious emails are designed to launch an attack on a user computer. Malicious email attachments include code or exploits to cause your computer to download or download from the internet. Again, malicious email is also, it can come like a URL or attachment. There is a URL, once you click on the URL, the malicious malware drop. Or you have an attachment, most probably as I told in Office docs, macro-enabled Excel. Always we have seen macro-enabled Excel files because in organization we used to communicate a lot of Excel documents. So maybe a macro enabled Excel, you click on that one, the macro will act machine, you drop the malware. So some of the examples of the malwares that transfer through emails are emoted, NGRAT, dark age. So I have few examples for phishing also, but since we are lack of time, I'm stopping here. Okay, so with that, so these are some of the offset tools, open source tools that probably you can refer and you can do a lot of things.
Start on a good for it. You selected, so you have. Okay.
One second. All these are open source tools. Okay, done.
Fine.
Any questions? Nothing?
So is there a difference between using this Proton mail and other Gmail approved?
Sorry.
Is there any difference in send and this transmission and encryption in Proton? Usually I have found that Proton mail is secure than using Gmail.
The feature they are using is different. Even also the features using in Gmail is not the feature that Yahoo uses. So that's why in the header information we have some standard headers out there. So we are only basing that standard headers. But the encryption they are using is different. The encryption that Gmail is using, not the encryption that Yahoo uses. That is not the encryption that Outlook uses. So each mailbox uses their own encryption mechanism. But for an investigation point of view, there are few fields that is common in all these mailboxes. We are looking close fields. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you so much. So I will give my contact also if you have any questions, you can properly.
Thank you, Midhun, for the informative session. So before going to the next session, we can have just 5 minutes break and then we can come back.
complex API layer. And what happens in modern architecture is many a times the APIs are not developed by API. You have a portion of APIs which you may be developing, but you may be consuming a lot of other APIs also, like third-party APIs. For instance, to enable maps functionality, we use Google Map API. So the modern architecture, APIs play a lot of importance, and in fact, it also makes your architecture a lot efficient. If instead of having to replicate functionalities, you can have a core set of microservices model, and then the same APIs can be leveraged across various channels. You can use the same logic for your mobile apps, web apps, different platforms, right? So, in fact, the recent study by in Baruwa says around 71% of the entire web traffic is APIs, right? And this is only going to increase, right? The trend what we are seeing is APIs are becoming lot more prevalent. But then, APIs do not get a very specific focus if you ask me. Many a times, when I get into conversations with developers, when we speak about APIs, well, it doesn't have a front end. Users are never going to use APIs directly, right? Users will only use the mobile app or the web app, right? But a lot of heavy lifting on the background or the behind the scenes is done by APIs. So another important thing is not just the prevalence of APIs, even APIs have a lot more access to the data, right? In fact, what happens is you may have various user roles, you may have various channels or various front-end portals available for the user, but all of this data transfer or the data transactions are happening through the API. So you can think of APIs like these electric lines which are like transferring data across, right? So APIs have a lot more relevance from that perspective. I'll come to this meme a bit later. See, another question is you already have a lot of existing mechanisms, right? You already have scanners, a lot of tools, a lot of mechanisms in order to protect the web applications. What's so special about API, right? Now, what we are doing for web applications, why can't we extend it to API? At the end of the day, it is still sending HTTP requests, right? Same request response. So that's where we have a couple of challenges. See, when I get into conversations with customers, the first problem customers face is they have an inventory of their web applications. They know what applications they have, but they do not have a detailed inventory of all their APIs. They do not know, for instance, what all third-party APIs they are using. And imagine, we had this experience from Log4j, right? When Log4j vulnerability came, the biggest challenge was figuring out, am I even using Log4j? Where is it, right? So we have that same problem with APIs. Most of the organizations do not but they are like versions of the APIs. Developers also tend to create multiple versions of the APIs, right? Some APIs may be sort of deprecated and not in use, right? And for that same reason, they are not maintained also. So we have an entire set of problems with API, and the number one problem is API. For web applications, there are these, time-tested vulnerabilities like SQL injection, maybe command injection. These are, vulnerabilities that has aged well. And my thought is, pretty much all of the existing tools offer a certain level of coverage for all of these web application vulnerabilities. Not everything, but at least, something like a SQL injection, you have enough prevention against. So when it comes to APIs, most of what we are speaking about web applications is applicable to API, but APIs have their own attack surface. There are very API-specific vulnerabilities, which probably a conventional web application tool may completely miss out. Right? We will see some of them. And as I said previously, APIs tend to have a lot more access than your human users. So if you have let's say, 5 different user roles, you typically think about putting an RBAC or a role-based access control against the users, right? But you need to think that all of this data transfer is happening over the APIs. So even if you have an RBAC on your users, pretty much the data transfer is happening using the APIs, and sometimes your APIs may have a lot more power than you think, right? And we don't really look at what sort of an access typically the API or server-to-server call has. Another thing is APIs typically have access to huge sets of data. as you'll see in some real world examples, that no human user would possibly have, right? So we need to look deeper in that aspect. APIs are basically integrators. They are stitching various parts of your network together, and they deal with all sorts of data. They have high levels of access. So this is one part we have to be very careful. And particularly when it comes to regulated industries like banks, healthcare providers, right? They are bound to various regulations. So, for example, in India, all the telecoms have to be compliant with what I say. Similarly, in the banking sector, of course, the payment side of it has to be compliant with PCI DSS. RBI is coming up with their own set of requirements, right? So there are regulations on one end, and when you don't know how many APIs you have, what access these APIs have, how are you even going to stay compliant? You cannot protect what is unknown, right? So that is the biggest problem. And see, probably I'll go to the case study and come back. Then it is a lot more relevant, right? So, and not surprisingly, API attacks are becoming a lot more favorite for ten million customers, right? They are exposed to the internet and there was no authentication required to connect to these APIs. And apparently, these endpoints where what you could do is you can provide a customer ID. Think of it like you're an Airtel or a Geo customer here. You put your customer ID or your phone number there, and then as the response to the API, you get all the customer details. For example, what is your address, right? Or what is the other details you typically share with the telecom, right? In the case of Optus, even government IDs. In India, if you want to take a mobile number, you typically give your Aadhaar, right? So even those government ID information was available as a response to the API. Even bigger problem is this was just a GET request, simple GET request. So as a part of URL, so you can append this information and you get the detail of a particular customer. And surprisingly, there was no rate limiting, no monitoring. Using the single endpoint or a series of endpoints, these threat actors were able to pull out 9.8 million records. That's almost 100% of this customers at that point in time, right? So if you really look at it, Optus is a massive company. They have an annual revenue of around I think 8 to 9 billion US dollars, and their cybersecurity budget is like multi-billion, right? They're spending like a fortune on cybersecurity, but all it took for an attack is a single API get call, and just do it like 9.8 million times, and you get all the customer accounts, right? Now this we really look at it, and again, call out again, Optus has not confirmed. This is what is available in the public source. I have also given it the links. See, it was a massive backlash for Optus, and then there were also regulatory reforms, right? The government started thinking, how we can prevent this. Now, this is not an isolated story of Optus. It has happened multiple times in India also. In India, how many times do you see headlines on our data, right? Being siphoned out and then put it on sale on the dark web. We probably don't go and see what is a vector, but a lot of those attacks could be API related, and in fact, that's what we are seeing. So a lot of these memes, right, make sense. You have a multi-billion cybersecurity budget, but expose your API to the internet, you're done, right? And you have all sorts of mechanisms. You have an application scanner, for which you are paying like lakhs of rupees. You have various scanners, right? All application scanners, web application scanners, whatsoever. But at the end of the day, just a call command would be able to do the job. So again, now we will go a bit deeper into why it is tricky to identify API-related vulnerabilities. As I told you previously, something you cannot buy fully, because many times APIs are leveraged by other front-end applications also. So in practice, what may happen is almost 100% of vulnerability is applicable to web application, may be relevant to APIs, but the problem is the APIs have their own unique set of problems, right? Which even a conventional web application penetration tester may not be able to identify unless they are digging in the API direction. So I'll show you a couple of examples. See, one such vulnerability is mass assignment, right? How many of you have heard about mass assignment before? Assuming it's a new vulnerability, it's pretty simple. So look at the left side of the slide, right? So I've given a sort of an example request, and what this request does is it basically sends a post request to the user's profile object in order to update two information. Basically, it is using the username, and then it is taking the username as the key, and then it is updating the bio of the user. So basically, you're doing something like a status here. So imagine this is the legitimate request going to the server. So what happens in this case, right? You need to think of the user's profile as an object. And if you remember the object-oriented programming, objects have various properties, right? And in a particular API call, you may not be tinkering only with very few properties. In this case, you are just updating the bio, right? Now imagine there is an attacker who is able to figure out somehow, sometimes an informed decision or sometimes simply by guessing, they're able to figure out that there are additional properties. There is an email property, there is an EastAdmin property. So the EastAdmin property in this case will basically change the role of the user and make it that person an admin, and the email is basically overriding the email of the user, right? So what an attacker can do is they can introduce these additional properties which are not there in the request, but it is there in the backend object model, and then they are able to override those critical parameters, right? Now the problem is, this is tricky to identify. If you have the API specification document with you, you know what all objects or what all optional parameters are there, then you are able to figure this out, right? So that is where a conventional scanner may not be able to figure this out 100%. And even a tester, right? If you do it in a typical black box or a gray box, you will not be able to do it. You actually need to see the API specification, what optional parameters are there, and then you need to target this kind of attack, right? So here the problem really is at an object level, there is no access control of properties of an object. And this is what we call as mass assignment. And in order to identify this vulnerability, you ideally should look at the API specification, look at those optional parameters, and then use it to do the attack. Similarly, you need access control on the on a higher level as well. So this is the case where imagine you have a smart device, and the smart device is constantly pushing data to the backend, right? Here this is sending the heartbeat information and the body temperature. For simplicity, only these two parameters, right? And if you see this particular request, what is interesting is on the header, there is a particular parameter going X user ID and numerical value, right? So this is denoting my current user. And what is happening is as I'm doing various activities across the day, my tracker is basically sending this request to the backend server, and it is constantly updating the data, right? The problem here is this is also very similar to the IDOR vulnerability that we see in the web. So if we are able to tamper that value of the user ID and make it to a different user's ID, in this case you can see it is easily predictable, it's just numerical value. That was the case in Outtest also, right? It was a predictable value, probably a phone number, and people were able to iterate. Similarly, here you can just change the user ID and you are able to push the data on behalf of somebody else. So if I know somebody else's user ID, I'm able to basically push wrong data, raw data into their tracking. And I could do a lot more things. Here the problem is, if you think of user ID as an object or as a component, there is no access control or validation on that level, right? And this is a lot more widespread. If you compare master statement versus proper object level authorization, this is a lot more widespread. And yeah, it is very common to find these vulnerabilities, right? See, I still remember testing one internal, I think it's an ERP system of a company. And all the employees used to submit their timesheets inside that system, all the expenses, everything. And then their supervisors had this permission to approve it. So what I used to do was I found that I treating the number by putting a different employee ID, probably I'm able to submit the expenses on behalf of somebody else, and the same person can approve it itself, because on the approval request, we just replace the ID. So again, this is very critical and also widespread. In fact, the latest study by, again, I think it's Infodba, says around 27% of account attacks in the whole API space is coming in into this category. This is very tricky for a scanner to figure out, because the scanner should have the context, right? It should understand that, okay, this field is iteratable and it denotes something of value. This is pretty similar to the exposure we had in the case of Optus. So many a times the APIs may be dealing with a larger data set, and they try to provide only a segment of the data to the user. And here you can see the use case here is you can query the tax data of a customer by providing the tax data. Okay, in India it is a PAN number, right? First problem here is you are sending the tax identifier, which is a very sensitive information, over a GET request. What is the problem if we transmit sensitive data over GET? Well, there is encryption, but so whenever you send data over GET, where does it appear? On a browser. It appears on the URL, and URLs may be shared, URLs may be bookmarked, URLs will also be cached. This is if you put cache control, right? The URL will still be cached inside the browser, basically. Not just that, you will have various levels, right? You will have maybe an application gateway. You will have a server which is creating the access block, right? So on various levels, these URLs will be recorded, right? The problem is, imagine some guy has access to the backend server or the intermediate proxy, right? From there, they can easily extract all this information, because URL is never considered as a sensitive information. In fact, people use it for marking all sorts of things, right? So that's the number one problem here. Second, as I will move, sometimes your APIs may have additional optional parameters which will get the full dump of the data. In this case, by adding an additional parameter, you are able to extract a lot more data. I mean, it's not visible here, but here, what's significant is by giving that full data parameter, we are able to get the bank account number of the person also. Now, this is a hypothetical example, but it is very real. I've seen several applications where you can use an verbose parameter, and then you are able to pull down a large amount of data, right? Now, see, with web applications, we know injections are pretty well known, right? Various kinds of injections, SQL injection, LDAP. So injection is basically when you are able to confuse the system into thinking that the data is a command. So for example, you confuse the databases into thinking that the data is an SQL query, this is SQL injection. That's what it works, right? So I think with a web application, it is relatively more straightforward. But with APIs, it is even more challenging, because you need to know the architecture. So when you interact with an API, you're receiving the request. You need to know what is happening on the backend systems, right? And that is getting a lot more difficult these days because of the complex architecture. So in this case, I have an API which is used for authentication, and what is happening is this API is speaking to an LDAP server, right? Are you familiar with LDAP? What is LDAP used for? So LDAP is one of the, if you want to, for example, integrate an application to Active Directory, That is, you have the enterprise active directory, right? You have which you use for authentication in a company corporate setup. LDAP is one of the channels through which you can do the integration. So in this case, the API is integrated to LDAP server. But if you look at the JSON format, right, it's not possible to identify that this is speaking to LDAP format. Because then it is sort of smartly masked on the API level. You see the API address is just a JSON request going, right? This could be used to validate the password against the database also. So that's where the problem is. Unless you have the architecture context, you are not able to understand what injection vulnerabilities are possible. You can try an SQL injection, it will never work because it's not speaking to a database. You can try a command injection here, it is not speaking to or it is not making operating system calls here, right? So that is where the understanding of architecture is absolutely important, and your scanners will never happen. How can a scanner understand the architecture of your application? So even as a tester, this is a question you need to ask, right? Look at the architecture. What are my APIs speaking to? Based on that, we can have various vulnerabilities. So here, let me explain. So there are two components here. There's the API server, which will collect the username and password, and then it will construct an LDAP query, and then it will make a query with that LDAP server. So if you see this API, the only part of relevance here is there's a query parameter there, where it is having a search term, a person's name, John, and probably the response to the API will be the details of that person, right? And you can also see the LDAP query that is sent by the system here. So in short, it is accepting username and password, and then it is using LDAP in order to query the search term that you have provided. Very simple. So in fact, an attacker can exploit this system by using the OR operator in LDAP. Very similar in SQL, right? We have the OR operator in order to append another part of the query. Similarly, we can use the pipe operator, which is the OR operator in the case of LDAP, and then we are giving a query here, CN equal to D star. That means all the records with the name that is starting with D is his query. So this is a simple example, but my point is, unless you know the architecture, unless you know what APIs are speaking to, you are not in a position to do any of this, right? So that's the problem with APIs. APIs may have complex interactions or integrations on the backend. Some of these APIs speaking to cloud components. Some of them may be speaking to legacy systems, right? So that architecture understanding is absolutely important. Business logic is a bigger problem even in web applications. And I think that's one of the areas where you always need a human to look at the application and figure out, right? So here, imagine, you have a valid application and this is a transaction, right? So what you're doing is you can provide a destination account, take a Google Pay, you can provide a mobile number, and then whatever money you are keying in, that transaction is happening. Assume that is the request we are seeing here. Now, how about you put a negative number in a transaction, right? So in the case of a transaction, a positive number means money is deducted from me and the money is going to the other person. What if the number is negative? Then it may be, I'm not saying it will be, but it may be interpreted as a reverse transaction. That you subtract minus 100, there's an addition. And then when you add minus 100 to another person, the money is deducted. Exact opposite, right? So this will not happen with any of the payment gateways. It's a possibility. You're creating something by yourself. It is a possibility. So how do you get that context into a tool? A tool will not be able to do that. So that is where business logic vulnerabilities are a bigger trouble even for web applications, but for APIs it is even bigger problem. Now, how many of you are familiar with GraphQL? Anybody work with GraphQL? Okay. See, GraphQL is ours to me. And again, I never got my head around GraphQL. It's honestly a little tricky for me. But I understand it's also very flexible, right? The advantage of GraphQL is you can have one endpoint and through that you can have thousands of different calls. That's where another problem is. From a tracking perspective, your GraphQL is just one endpoint, but it can be doing hundreds of thousands of functions, right? So I'll give you another example. So if, let's say, from an API perspective, if you're implementing an API which is authenticating user, that is, you're providing username and password, the API will basically authenticate something. How do you prevent the account lockout, or how do you prevent somebody from sending too many authentication requests? Rate limiting, right? So conventionally, that's what we have been doing here. Again, I have all the snippets here. You implement this, you will have rate limiting. So as a typical developer, I'm using GraphQL, and my thought is, maybe in order to secure my authentication mechanism, I use rate limiting, right? So if you see, this is not entirely visible, but you have a mutation here which accepts username and password. And after accepting username password, it will do some processing, and then it will say whether it is acceptable or not. Very simple. Mutation is like a function in the case of other languages. And in order to secure my API, what I did is I wrote a custom logic which is rate limiting based on an IP. So I think here, as per the window I have defined, only 5 requests are allowed. So my assumption is, as a developer, one person can set only 5 requests. Right? So I'm seeing. But with GraphQL, the problem is GraphQL, so yeah, this is conventional brute force. You send conventional brute force, after 5 requests, it will say that you have too many requests. I don't know, right? With GraphQL, it is very funny. You can actually, GraphQL offers a very good solution for this. You can actually do something called as query batch. So that means a single request, you can send thousands of requests. So what you do is, instead of querying once, if you see the previous one, right? There is just a single query that is going. So you can batch the queries together, and instead, like I said, it's all the 5 queries in one request. This is the GraphQL query batching, and with that, your rate limiting is not accepting anymore. You can send thousands of requests using one request itself. So what you need to keep in mind is that also based on the technology, your conventional defenses that you apply on web applications may not be relevant for APIs. So in short, we've seen 6 different cases, right? The point is, you cannot treat APIs in the same lens that you treat web applications. Now let's look at the typical defenses we have, right? We can do maybe application scanning as criticism, or we can have a graph that is configured. The problem with all of this is, even if you look at a scanner or a map, typically it is rule-based, right? In a map, you have a list of rules, and it basically looks at all the requests based on those rules. The problem is, for an API, it doesn't work always. It works for relatively straightforward attack, but it doesn't work for some of these complex scenarios that we have just discussed, right? So that's where it will start to break, and we need better defenses if you want to protect our APIs. So, in order to understand more about various API-specific vectors and what is more critical for APIs, I would recommend you to go and take a look at the OWASP top 10 for APIs. OWASP has several top 10 projects. We are all familiar with the top 10 for web applications. Similarly, there is one top 10 for APIs as well, and the most recent version has came out in 2023. And I also have a link here. That's pretty elaborate, right, in terms of all the threats APIs typically face. So now, we've talked about all sorts of different problems. We understood that API is an area where we need to have additional protections, or we need to look at APIs from a different security lens. How do we think about protecting APIs, right? Or where does zero trust come in? So, have you heard about this term zero trust before? Yeah, it is everywhere, and my take is zero trust is not a product. Right? If you see some products advertising zero trust, it is not fit. It is probably like some products advertising that they are Rust. Rust is like the philosophy. Right? It's a way of writing applications. Same as the case with zero trust. Zero trust is the mentality. I'll tell you the best example of zero trust is your airport. So you go to an airport. On the first gate itself, your identity is verified. And if you remember, if you just recollect, right, your identity is not just verified once. It is in fact verified at each level. You first go to the gate, your identity is verified. Then you go to the boarding counter, or to get your boarding pass, your identity is verified, and you get a temporary token, which is your boarding pass, which is only valid for that session, right? You cannot use your boarding pass for another session. And again, you can see all of these elements here. One, there is explicit verification. There is no privilege. Your identity is always verified at multiple points as required. Second, you only get access to, for example, you have passed the first counter. You only get access to a limited set of areas unless you pass the security check-in, right? So it is like segmented, and people only typically get access to areas where they should have access. So you are not going to get access to the cruise, launch, for example, right? So, and there is micro-segmentation. So the whole airport is segmented into different areas, and they have security against each of the areas, and your identity is verified at each gate, right? And you're also monitored every night, right? As long as you are inside that airport premises, you are under constant monitoring through various ways, right? And there is also dynamic policy enforcement. Imagine you're a wanted person, you have a visa, you might get through the initial gate, but at some point they are going to detain you because it's just not a static thing. There is a dynamic policy also, right? So, in my opinion, airport is a perfect example of how you should implement security or zero trust when it comes to application. And the best approach is if we can sort of model this mentality when we create our APIs, right? So what we need to do is that whether it is a server-to-server call or a call that is coming from an internal system or an external API, all of these endpoints or channels should be validated and verified with no implicit trust. That is, do not trust any API call as such. And you would want to continuously verify. And also, instead of hard-coded problems which may work, which may be living for days or months, you should use short-term blueprints and constantly verify your API calls. And also, it is very important to monitor your API calls. Imagine if Optus had a mechanism to monitor the API calls. It was easy, 9.8 million API calls in sequential fashion. If you think about it, it's trivial, right? So even real-time monitoring is absolutely important. Dynamic policy enforcement is an area where at least there is a market gap. If you look at products like AppG, right? On the gateway, you are able to configure a lot of policies which is able to provide you some sort of dynamic policy enforcement, but still this is quite evolving, right? But at least the other things in any architecture we can start thinking about. How do we ensure that we are not assuming or trusting by default, and how do we always verify? From an enterprise standpoint, this is more from the developer mentality standpoint, how you can bring in zero trust. From an enterprise standpoint, there are a few things we can change. So the first thing is the organization should recognize APIs as an important area of concern, right? That is, currently organizations may have a vulnerability management program for applications and infrastructure. Similarly, there should be a very API-focused program. As a part of the program, the first thing you want to do is you want to create an API inventory. In many of our organizations, you may know that there's something called a CMDB, which is a collection of all the assets that the organization has, all the IT assets, software assets, right? The API should also be part of a similar tracking. And the biggest problem with APIs is, right, we can always say that, the number one problem is API discovery, but to do API discovery is not an easy thing. So imagine in an organization where there are hundreds of products, right? It is not easy to go and dissect all of these applications and figure out what all APIs they're using. And it is also changing. Imagine you're using a lot of third-party APIs. These third parties are also making changes. They're introducing new APIs. So it is not a one-time activity, right? So ideally, you would want to identify and access these APIs. What is critical, what is important, and then categorize them accordingly. And it is not a one-time activity. Ideally, you would want some solutions, right? There are a lot of tools available in the market which can, that's also evolving, but there are tools that can help you make an API inventory. And the typical integration points are, in a network, if you look at the application gateway, right, a lot of your traffic will be channeled to the gateway. So if you are able to get the logs from the application gateway, that is one place where you get a lot of visibility on the API also. Similarly, you can do it on various levels. You can do it on the endpoint level. There are several options available. But we need to figure out a way and then start collecting information about all the APIs. That is the only way you can identify shadow APIs or the APIs that are undocumented, right? So not just the APIs. In the case of GraphQL, you understand the API will be just probably this one, but we have thousands of parameters, different mutations, different possible calls. So you would also want to categorize all the endpoints, parameters, the optional parameters, and another important aspect is you should clearly identify what data is handled by the API, right? For example, if the API is dealing with government entities or healthcare data, you would want to note which parameters are sending out the data. And also, you should define regular expressions for, let's say for PAN number, there is a regular expression. So if you simply make a very simple rule based on the PAN number regular expression, you're able to figure out all the APIs which are setting on PAN number. But if you see that there is an instance where the PAN number is sent out to, over the request, or it is sent out to an external company, you can always figure out. The first step is you should figure out what is your sensitive data, because the definition of sensitive data will vary from organization to organization. And finally, it's not a one-time activity, it's a continuous activity because your API landscape is changing. One, it is changed by your developers, then it is also changed by your integrators or various third parties you work with. The conventional tools that you use for web applications offer some level of cover for API, but you should evaluate if those tools are evolving to provide support for APIs. If not, you should supplement the automated scanning with some focused manual penetration testing, identify critical APIs and get qualified pen tester to do the testing on the APIs. And these days we also speak a lot about the shift left mentality, which is more towards how do we adopt security early on. Again, there's this analogy, right? If you look at making cars, right? Cars go through a lot of heavy structural design, aerodynamic, lot of evaluations before it is made. Now imagine you're making a car without doing any of this and you're really doing crash test. That's what that is happening these days, right? You make an application and then you go to do a pen test and then you get a bunch of vulnerabilities, you figure out how to deal with it, right? So that's not an optimal solution. So the shift left mentality is more about taking in security early on in the life cycle. For example, when you're writing down the requirements for software, then itself you can determine or you can not know that I want encryption on the software. I probably want to use maybe an enterprise grade data link prevention system, or I would want a solution for securing the customer passwords or accounts. So such security requirements also should get into your requirements phase, and then it should go into the design phase, right? Where you can have interesting activities like threat modeling, which can identify vulnerabilities without any cost. Right? When you're designing this in the paper, and you are able to identify vulnerabilities, the cost to fix that vulnerability is trivial. Just think that. Whereas imagine the system is built and then you want to change something fundamental like RBAC, is going to be absolutely costly, right? So this is pretty high level, but these would be a couple of the steps that organizations and we as technologists can influence our organizations into going, right? Of course, this is an evolving topic as well, but this should sort of give that kind of. So that's all I wanted to cover for today. So my intention was to give you this concept of why API security is important and what are those one or two things we can do in order to make the situation better. So if you have questions, I'm happy to take.
In your examples, you've shown request operation to bear property.
Right. That's another point. Yes.
You can speak of.
So, see, if you look at API security, there are even bigger problems, and that is one valid area, right? How do we deal with API authentication? And that's one area. See, many times I see people hard coding. Parent tokens are even better. I've seen people using basic authentication in the case of APIs, right? The problem with basic authentication is it is just encoding, and you have a static username and password, which is getting sent out with every request, which is really how worse as it can get. But in reality, you don't want to use anything that is hard-coded or static. You want to ideally integrate your APIs with something more secure, like an OAuth-based flow, right? But API authentication is another important area, and an effective control is mutual authentication. If you look at TLS, right, there is only one-way authentication when we use TLS in the way we do. That is, the site is authenticating itself. For example, you go to google.com, it is presenting its certificate and telling you that I am google.com. But as a user, you are not authenticating yourself, but you are not proving your identity. At least when you browse to google.com. When it comes to mutual authentication, both the parties have to present a certificate and then authenticate, right? So that's a really effective technique, because if you have mutual authentication on the API, you're not even able to make that network level connectivity. So you're not able to send an HTTP request itself. Because on the TLS level, you're not able to do the handshake. because both the parties have to give a certificate, right? So it is applicable in B2B APIs. If you have APIs where two organizations are speaking, you can always have mutual authentication, and that is sort of improving the authentication of APIs. So authentication of APIs is a big area where again we need to.
In that case, also, there is a compromise that needs to happen. The perfect API security. The person has to know the way it is taking on. Maybe the API talks. So you have messed up an application or if we use this API management APIs, the application takes care of the basic level, and you have to know the organization specific key. Exactly. Then we will be able to make this queries. Right?
Exactly.
In a simple case, it is possible, right? We can just try and see what response that we get.
So forget authentication. The problem here is, in fact, some of the studies are saying in a typical organization, there are hundreds of unauthenticated APIs exposed to it. That is an even bigger problem, right? So the next problem is how do we secure authentication. So these are very valid problems for APIs. Any other thoughts, questions? All right, let's start. You have a question?
You mentioned about dynamic policy, like
Right.
maybe something like mentioning something like if there is an increase in traffic, the API
That's I think in application they have some spike arrest, something similar. They have a couple of policies, but it is evolving. See, eventually what we want to see is something like a conditional access, right? Where the user behavior is also looked at. Imagine in the after space, nobody has a requirement to send these many requests, right? So spike arrest is a sort of a policy, but again it is evolving. I think I'm hoping that as products evolve, we'll have a lot more conditional access based policies, right? So it is not looking at static rule set, but rather looking at behavior and other context in order to take a call whether to allow the API or not. All right, thank you all for listening in, and hope the session gave you at least a couple of insights, right? So thank you again.
Thank you, Dhanith, for the insightful session on API security and the review and the task. Now we will come to the end of the session. The water science and management.
So, so thank you everyone. Thank you, Midhun. Thank you, Dhanith, for this wonderful sections. It was very informative. On behalf of we will OWASP and thank every one of you for coming. There was a slight issue in the past, in the front office, and next sessions we will be, taking care of that as well. And, yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, thanks.
Any feedback?